Hey everyone, my name is Michelle Scott. I'm the manager of capital planning at the Massachusetts Department of Transportation. Here to speak to you all this evening about MassDOT's draft 25 to 29 capital investment plan. And to get things started, I'm going to turn the presentation over to my colleague Chris Clem, who will go over the meeting protocols.
Thanks so much, Michelle. Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Clem, and I am one of the MassDOT producers this afternoon, alongside Raisa Kwame, who will help facilitate the question and answer session. Before we dive into the meeting, I just want to take a quick minute to review some rules of engagement, as well as some Zoom basics. On the bottom of your screen, you will find your audio settings. Your microphones are muted during the meeting, but you will have the opportunity to speak during the question and comment session at the end of the presentation by using the raise hand function to indicate you wish to speak. You can rename yourself by clicking the participants button to open the participants list, finding your name, and clicking rename. If you have questions or comments during the presentation at any time, you can put them in the chat box. We will address them at the end of the presentation during the question and comment session. If you need to dial into the meeting tonight, you can do so calling the number on your screen. That is 646-931-3860, meeting ID 852-0532-0500. If you're having any trouble with the meeting technology during the presentation, you can please call the number on the top right of your screen. That is 857-276-0893. And finally, closed captioning is available tonight. It is automatically generated by Zoom, and you can use that by clicking the Show Captions button at the bottom of your screen. This virtual public meeting will be recorded. The Massachusetts Department of Transportation may choose to retain and distribute the video, images, audio, and/or chat transcript. All parts of this meeting are considered public record. By continuing attendance with this virtual public meeting, you are consenting to participate in a recorded event. If you are not comfortable being recorded, please turn off your camera and keep your microphone muted, or you may choose to excuse yourself from the meeting. Again, your microphone and camera are automatically disabled upon entering the meeting. The meeting will be open to questions and answers at the end of the presentation, so please participate because your feedback is very important to us. On your screen, you'll see the notice of MassDOT's policy on diversity and civil rights. If you'd like to learn more about our policies and how they affect our public meetings and hearings, please visit or contact the MassDOT's Office of Diversity and Civil Rights. All questions and comments are welcome and appreciated. However, we do request that you refrain from any disrespectful comments. Now I'll pass it back to Michelle. Thank you very much.
All right, well, thank you so much, Chris. Before we get rolling with the formal presentation, I do want to acknowledge our MPO partners that are working on the meeting with us this evening and have been working with us throughout the CIP development process. They include the Cape Cod Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is staffed by the Cape Cod Commission, the Martha's Vineyard Commission, and the Nantucket Planning and Economic Development Commission. So I'll start by taking a few minutes to give our MPO colleagues opportunities to introduce themselves. And I'd like to start with Colleen Medeiros from the Cape Cod Commission.
Yes, good evening, everyone. My name is Colleen Medeiros. I'm the Transportation Program Manager at the Cape Cod Commission, and we are the staff to the Cape Cod Metropolitan Planning Organization. We're happy to be here tonight and want to thank MassDOT for hosting this outreach for the Cape and Islands on the draft 2025 to 2029 SIP. And we're always thankful for the collaboration on MassDOT for the many priorities in our region, from bridges, intersections, bike paths, transit, and rail infrastructure. We're excited to see such key projects such as the Bass River Bridge replacement in Dennis Yarmouth, the median installation on Scenic Highway in Bourne, the Route 6 Shank-Painter Road Corridor project in Provincetown. It's going to be transformational, as well as a Safe Routes to School project in Harwich and support for bus electrification to the Cape Cod Regional Transit Authority. And as we all know, the Cape Cod Canal bridges and canal area roadways are a vital piece of infrastructure to this region that are in need of desperate need of attention. And we appreciate the state's significant support and allocation of funding for this critical infrastructure project. and I'll pass it over back to Michelle.
Oh, Michelle, I think you're still muted.
Yep,
Sorry.
thank you. So I'd like to turn things, thank you, Colleen. And now I'd like to turn things over to Mike Morrow at the Martha's Vineyard Commission.
Thanks, Michelle. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to join us here tonight. We, again, echo what Colleen had said with the Cape Cod Commission. We are very appreciative and thankful for our collaboration that we have with DOT, things that we have worked on and they've helped us push through on, where we have endorsed our 2025 to 2029 Transportation Improvement Program. Just earlier today at our Joint Transportation Committee meeting, we endorsed our 2025 Unified Planning Work Program. We've also endorsed several TIP amendments that would allocate or reallocate additional monies to Regional Transit Authority out here, the Vineyard Transit Authority, for operating costs, operating assistance, give them the ability to purchase some signage, replacement vehicles. So we're always thankful, and it's always a pleasure and very easy to work with the people up in Boston. So we're very thankful for that. So again, thank you for joining us tonight, and get back to Michelle.
All right, thank you so much. And now I'd like to turn things over to Mike Burns at the Nantucket Planning and Economic Development Commission.
Thank you, Mike Burns, Transportation Program Manager at the NPNEDC. I want to thank MassDOT for hosting this presentation, and thank the public for participating. I'd like to echo what both Colleen and Mike both said about how excited we are to see some projects included here for Nantucket. We're excited to see the Milestone Road at Pulpus Road intersection improvement to improve operation and safety, and to better accommodate bike and pedestrian traffic along a busy state highway. Thank you.
All right, well, thanks so much, everyone. So to get started with our formal presentation, I've got some high-level items that I hope everyone will take away from the discussion, and as we're going into the public comment period later in this meeting. First, that MassDOT's CIP, the topic of our discussion tonight, is our rolling capital investment plan, which guides how we plan for, construct, and maintain a transportation system in the Commonwealth, and how we'll be spending to do that over the next 5 years. There are many components that go into this process, as I'll be talking about, but input and feedback from residents and organizations and other stakeholders is a really important part of that. It informs the way we approach our investment strategies, the way we establish our CIP programs, and how we ultimately incorporate investments into a given CIP. And so we've, been considering input from different influences and factors throughout this process. We're in the final stages of our development for the 25 to 29 CIP. A draft is now out for public review and comment, and I'll be talking a little bit more about how you can explore the draft CIP, provide your feedback, and what is coming next. So a little bit more by way of overview. So the CIP is constrained to the funding resources that we have available for transportation spending. And I'll talk a little bit more in a few minutes about what resources are available. It is what we call a cash flow document, and that basically shows the spending on a project over its implementation life. So for example, for a bridge project, over the spending over the course of its construction. So a project can be included over many years in a CIP, and often rolls from one CIP until the next, until it's constructed. The investments included cover a wide variety of modes and assets, ranging from roads and bridges to bicycle and pedestrian facilities, to state-funded transit items, the state rail network, public use airports, MassDOT's enterprise services such as planning and information technology, as well as capital assets for the Registry of Motor Vehicles. The diagram on the right-hand portion of the slide shows major categories of priorities that we have for the CIP, and this framework has been in effect for a number of years now. First major priority being reliability, which is focused on maintaining the system and moving towards a state of good repair. Second priority being modernization, which is focused on making the system safer, making upgrades to improve accessibility and to accommodate local economic vitality. And finally, expansion is focused on increasing options that folks have for traveling around the Commonwealth. In recent years, this is primarily focused on expanding our statewide bicycle and pedestrian network and statewide rail network. To support and advance each of these priority areas, we have a number of CIP programs that effectively function as buckets for individual projects and investments. So to talk a little bit about funding, we have resources from 4 broad categories, the first being federal dollars. These include dollars that come to Massachusetts by formula through the various USDOT modal administrations. It includes discretionary dollars for based on awards that may come from competitive grant processes. And in these cases, once Massachusetts or MassDOT in particular is awarded funds, we include the CIP, them in the CIP as a next step. On the state funding side, we have a couple different sources. State bond cap refers to general obligation bond proceeds that are made available for transportation. There are a number of other special obligation bonds that fund things like bridges or improvements to the rail system. On the MassDOT side, we have revenues that are generated by the tolled facilities, including the Metropolitan Highway System, Western Turnpike, and Dover Bridge. Revenues that are generated can go back into investments to maintain those facilities. And then we have a variety of other sources ranging from municipal or private contributions and trust funds such as the Central Artery Tunnel Project Repair and Maintenance Trust Fund. So when thinking more about our 25 to 29 capital plans specifically, we accounted for both what we call internal and external factors related to its development. On the external factors, we of course consider federal funding levels and federal policy. A lot of this was most recently established in the bipartisan infrastructure law, which was enacted in 2021. During that period, there was both increasing in federal funding for transportation, but also creation of new programs that placed increased emphasis on things like climate and resiliency and our CIP response to those. We're of course shaped by revenues provided by the Commonwealth, as well as the revenues that are coming out of our tolled facilities. We're constantly trying to respond to evolving travel demands, conditions, and needs, especially as we continue to come out of the COVID-19 pandemic. Partner agency planning processes, such as those decisions that are made by metropolitan planning organizations or the RTAs, have a strong influence in our CIP, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the presentation. And of course, feedback on past CIPs and feedback collected during the development process is also an important influence. On the internal side, the priorities of the Healy-Driscoll administration shape our CIP. This includes increased emphasis on a number of areas, including safety, asset condition, climate, both on the mitigation and decarbonization side and the resiliency side, and of course, maintaining our partnerships with municipalities. At the MassDOT level, you may be familiar with the development of Beyond Mobility, which is the statewide long-range transportation plan. A public comment period for that draft document recently closed, and we're in the final stages of reviewing and responding to feedback. This 25 to 29 CIP already begins to draw on some of the priority areas identified in Beyond Mobility. And one thing you'll start to see in the coming years is our CIP really be realigned to the priorities and action steps of that document. We're also shaped by policies and priorities from our modal and asset management plans, performance measures, both at the federal and state level, and other process improvements. So again, here are captured some of the major safety investment areas for the CIP, including safety, climate stewardship, asset management, and partnerships with municipalities. And we have social and geographic equity as a cross-cutting theme where we want to make sure we're advancing and equity and addressing imbalances across all these different investment areas. So to talk a little bit more about partner agency planning processes and other factors that shape CIP development at more of a micro level. And I talked about the factors affect our broader investment strategy, but some things that may affect the inclusion of specific investments within the CIP include, particularly for our reliability projects, the prioritization that comes out of asset management systems for things like bridges and pavement. For more of our modernization and expansion-oriented projects, many of these go through a project selection criteria evaluation process to see how they advance goals like economic vitality or environmental stewardship, things of that nature. And then, of course, the status of the project itself, whether it's been initiated through a MassDOT design or development process, its status and design, and other implementation factors may affect its ability to be included within the CIP. And then coming back to that partner agency decision-making process, including decisions made at the MPO level. And this, talk a little bit more about this specifically. So each of the MPOs is responsible for the oversight of federal funding that comes to their respective regions of Massachusetts. They develop their transportation improvement programs for their regions. That information is incorporated not only in the Massachusetts State Transportation Improvement Program, but it also becomes an important component of the CIP. And that's highlighted in the diagram on the right of the slide. The green boxes highlight the components of the tips that are brought into the CIP. They include the federally funded roadway projects and the associated match, as well as state match for federally aided transit projects. The boxes in blue highlight the other components of the CIP, and generally these boxes are roughly proportionate to the spending that's in the CIP. So this green share, reflective of the transportation improvement programs, is a really important part of the overall CIP. All of this is to say that for folks in the audience, if you're not already engaged with your area's metropolitan planning organization, either through their public engagement or ongoing board meetings, we definitely encourage you to be involved in your region's process, because that goes on to shape broader investment decisions at the state level. Talk a little bit about timeline. So the CIP is developed roughly over a 9 to 10 month period, beginning in the fall. The colored bars on this chart show the major steps involved. The bars are long because this is a pretty iterative process where we refine things based on updated information about project status or the availability of funding resources. We're now moving into that kind of maroon bar stage of finalizing the plan with our comment period for our draft running from July 20th through, June 20th through July 10th. The stars indicate major actions taken by the MassDOT Board of Directors, who is responsible for reviewing and approving the plan. They released a draft for public comment back on June 20th, and we are expecting to regroup with them on July 17th for hopefully approval of a final CIP. So this slide functions as a dashboard for spending within the overall CIP. The top table is organizing the spending by the 3 major priority areas I referenced, as well as spending by division. It includes obviously the lion's share being focused on reliability, approximately 61% of the overall CIP, as shown in that donut diagram in the lower left, with another 23% focused on modernization. You will see in that top table that there is spending for the MPTA, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later in the presentation. The table at the bottom right shows spending, and that middle column is the total for our CIP, which is about $16.5 billion across all investment areas. So a little bit more about the CIP content. It includes more than 50 investment programs and more than 1,600 individual investments. That number is probably closer to 1,700. The chart on the right shows the top 10 programs by 25 to 29 spending. You can see that far and away the largest is our bridge program at $5.4 billion. This is focused on improving, replacing, rehabilitating, or otherwise improving bridge condition throughout the Commonwealth. You can see that a number of other of these top programs include things like the Chapter 90 program, support for interstate pavement improvements and things of that nature. We do have a number of new programs coming online for the CIP. It includes programs for freight and improving freight movement on the National Highway Freight Network, grants to transportation management associations to expand local transit options, and a water transportation pilot program for communities around Boston Harbor. Approximately $847 million in Commonwealth-funded MBTA investments is included in the CIP, and overall, this 25 to 29 spending is supported by approximately $269 million in competitive grant awards. So want to highlight some things in the focus areas I talked about earlier in the presentation in terms of safety and asset management. We've already talked about the bridge program. There's also another $550 million, or more than $550 million for public use airport capital expenditures. We have safety integrated across a variety of CIP programs. It's a very integral part of the things that we do in making transportation improvements. This $144 million is referencing specific funding for systematic safety improvements to address roadway deficiencies that we identify across the Commonwealth in conjunction with findings from our strategic highway safety plan. The next category, climate stewardship, we think of in three ways. First is providing alternatives to car and truck travel. This includes over $550 million that we're focusing on programs for active transportation that'll expand bicycle and pedestrian options, $439 million for our state-owned rail network, and another $370 million for investments in RTAs and other local transit providers. A next component of this is the investments in the Highway Resiliency Program, which will address things like flood relief and culvert improvement projects, and then another $89 million for improving charging stations along major roadways. And then in terms of partnerships with municipalities, we have over $1.3 billion in grant programs for Massachusetts cities and towns. To speak a little bit more about that topic, the table on the right of the screen highlights our major municipal grant programs included in the CIP. By far the largest is the Chapter 90 program, but others include our longstanding Complete Streets program, our local bottleneck reduction program to address congestion hotspots in cities and towns, our municipal pavement and small bridge programs, the latter of which helps communities address bridge improvement needs on those that may not be eligible for federal dollars given their size. And then our Shared Streets and Spaces program, which was initiated during the COVID-19 pandemic as a way to improve street spaces for bicycle and pedestrian movement, for outdoor dining and transit access. And it's continued to be very popular and has been extended and carried forward as we've come out of the pandemic. You can find out more information about these different programs through MassDOT's new Grant Central online portal. It provides a lot of details and facilitates the application process and the customer service process between MassDOT and municipalities as communities apply and are awarded funding. So definitely encourage you to check that resource out using the QR code below. So to talk a little bit more about the state-funded items for the MBTA, the MBTA develops a separate CIP from MassDOT, but we do have a little bit of overlapping projects and spending, and these relate to MBTA investments that are specifically funded by the Commonwealth, either through bond cap or rail enhancement program special obligation bond proceeds. So some highlights from that category are shown below, including spending for bi-level commuter rail coaches for South Coast Rail, and red and orange line vehicles, among other investments. So I just want to go over a couple of highlights specifically for the Cape and Islands region of Massachusetts. These are by no means meant to be an exhaustive list of what's included in the CIP for this part of the state, and I'll be talking more later in the presentation about where you can find more information about the CIP, about projects in community or that are of interest to you. These are just meant to give sampling of projects at different scales, different parts within the region, covering different modes, things of that nature. I do want to highlight that the spending shown here is specifically for what's in our 25 to 29 CIP. Some of these projects have may have longer term lifetimes than even the 5-year CIP, and so aren't reflective of total costs, but you can find more information about that in the CIP itself. So some examples in the roadway and bridge category, of course, include the Cape Cod Bridges program, investments in the Sagamore Bridge. They're planned for 25 to 29. We have smaller scale improvements, both for bridges and for corridors throughout the Cape and Islands region, including on Shank Painter Road in Provincetown and the Main Street corridor improvements in Dennis. On the climate and resiliency side, one example on the resiliency side, of course, is culvert replacement work happening in Oak Bluffs on Beach Road. We also consider efforts to integrate electric vehicles into our transit system statewide as part of our efforts to improve climate. And so the spending for replacement electric vehicles for the Cape Cod Regional Transit Authority included here. The active transportation side, examples include the shared use path along Bears' Way in Barnstable, Bourne Rail Trail construction, and safe routes to school improvements in Harwich. Air, rail, and transit includes a variety of other investments, such as the runway improvements at Nantucket Memorial Airport, terminal renovations in Martha's Vineyard. For rail improvements, we have grade crossing work happening on the Cape Main, and vehicle replacement work for the Vineyard Transit Authority. And again, this is just meant to be a sampling. Lots more included in the CIP itself. So to tell you a little bit more about how you can explore and look for things, our CIP is available at mass.gov/CIP, specifically on our Developing the Capital Investment Plan page. It's available as a PDF and as an Esri story map that has some interactive visualizations that you can explore to look at spending and other details in different ways. It's made up of the main document, which includes an explanation of how we put the CIP together and some investment highlights statewide. Appendix A lists CIP projects. They're organized at a high level by MassDOT division, and then within that, either by municipality or by another grouping, such as by RTA, depending on the mode. And Appendix B provides more details about our CIP investment programs. Future updates to the CIP following this draft will include discussion of an equity analysis that we perform on MassDOT and MBTA projects, as well as any changes made since the release of the draft. Talking a little bit more about our public engagement activities. So again, our public comment period began on June 20th and is running through July 10th. We're holding public meetings throughout Massachusetts. We've had a couple earlier this week. The map on the right of the screen shows the regions that we've covered and the dates for which the meetings are scheduled. I do want to stress that if we are having 2 more meetings next week, one focused on the Boston region and one focused on the Northern Middlesex, Merrimack Valley region. However, if you know of folks who are interested in attending but unable to make it tonight, we do have cover the same fundamental information about the CIP in every meeting, and we take comments about any aspect of the CIP, any region of the state, at every meeting. So folks are definitely welcome at any of these meetings, even if it doesn't cover the specific region where you live. We're continuing to coordinate with our MPOs and other partners to share information about the availability of the draft. If you wish to comment, there's a couple of different ways you can do that. You can email us at masscip@state.ma.us. You can send us letters. Any verbal comments that you make at the meeting during the Q&A session tonight will be included as part of that comment record. I'll also talk in a minute about a web-based comment tool that you can use to explore and provide feedback on the CIP. So following July 10th, we will be sharing these comments and proposed changes to the CIP with the MassDOT Board of Directors. And this will feed into the conversation that we'll be having with them at the July 17th with the proposed final CIP and our request for them to approve that to initiate the process, spending and activities for 25 to 29. So just a little bit more about our project viewer. This is a tool you can use to look at projects in different modal categories in different parts of the state through a series of filters that are available. One feature that's included for projects that are included in the CIP, and on the main page you'll see a little toggle button that should filter for projects on the CIP, is that there's a comment field opening. If you click on a project, you should see an interface with public comments all the way to the right. You click on that, those words there, and it'll bring up a interface where you can enter your name, your comments, and so it's your feedback is tied to that specific project, and we incorporate these into our overall comment record as well. So just a little bit about how we use the feedback that we receive. Comments on projects that are planned or underway are shared with MassDOT divisions. Really every comment we get is shared with different divisions in the department, but I'll talk a little bit about how we use them at different levels. So as I was saying, the comments that we receive on projects that are in the CIP are shared with divisions and project managers so that we can support project development and implementation. If you're interested in a project that's not yet included in the CIP, we also share that information to indicate the level of public interest in the project. And that could be a way to kind of kickstart the initiation process if it's not already in the pipeline for design and project management. At one level up for programs and priorities, your feedback about our investment programs helps shape decisions about what programs we include in the CIP and how they should be sized. And finally, broader comments about the CIP development process, not only shapes our investment strategy, but how we share information about the CIP, how we organize our materials and things of that nature. So comments of any kind are helpful for us in our broader process. Just one last topic I'd like to cover that, while not directly related to the CIP, does feed into it down the line, and this is the Massachusetts travel study. So right now, MassDOT is collecting information from households throughout the state about daily transportation habits. This helps us understand how people are using roads, transit, bike lanes, etc., to make their daily trips to work or for shopping or recreation. And this information helps us understand how these facilities are being used today and what improvements might be needed. So again, this has effects for broader policy, and then eventually trickles down into capital investment decision-making. So households have been invited to participate in this study at random throughout Massachusetts to make sure we're getting a sampling of households throughout the state. If your household has received an invitation to participate, we definitely hope you will. At the Massachusetts Travel Study website, there's information about how you can sign up, use various methods to provide your responses and get your other questions answered. So with that, I'm going to turn it over again to my colleague, Chris, to kick off the Q&A portion with some protocols.
Thanks so much, Michelle. For those of you that wish to speak, ask a question verbally, you can do so by using the raise hand function to indicate that you wish to talk, and I'll give you permission to unmute your microphone. Try and limit your questions to one at a time. There are a fair number of us on the call tonight. We want to make sure everyone has the opportunity to participate. If you're calling on the phone, you can use *9, which will raise your hand, and I'll call out the last 4 digits of your phone number to unmute your audio. You can also submit a question using the chat function, and we'll read that out loud. Please state your name before your question, and as I mentioned earlier, try to keep it brief to begin with to give everyone the chance to participate, but you are welcome to come back around and ask multiple questions. And with that, we will go to the raised hands. I thought I just saw one. Don't be shy. Feel free to ask any questions or comments, or let Michelle know that she's done a great job. And as you all might have seen, our colleague Stephanie has posted some links in the chat. You can use those to access the CIP comment tool, the plan itself, as well as the statewide long-range plan beyond mobility. Right, I see Stephen Buckley. You can unmute yourself.
Yes, Steve Buckley. I'm Yeah, that's got an echo here. Anyway, could you share the screen and show how the public comment tool works?
Sure. Is it Michelle, which slide was that?
Yeah, so that was this slide. I'm trying to see if we can actually bring that comment tool up really quick. Just taking a moment here.
Take your time. Steve, you're referring to the project viewer and this comment tool, correct? Click the silence as a yes.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, I can, Chris, if I can share screen, I can demonstrate that.
Let me stop. Okay, go ahead, Michelle.
Okay, can folks see this window now?
Yep.
All right, great. So here's kind of an example of what the main interface for the tool looks like. You know, there's these filters over here. In some cases, folks are really familiar with their project number. You can take a look. I think you can enter information about municipality or district in this field. Other options are, you know, you can filter by your MPO, if you're familiar with that. Look at different CIP programs. You know, look at different divisions, such as the, you know, aeronautics division, the highway division. But all, you know, and then we have in this kind of center field, you know, there's different projects listed. You know, you can click on the more info and have this map on the far right that you can use to explore as well. Delver here in the bottom left, you can see this included and in CIP toggle button. And this is important because this project viewer actually houses a lot more information about other projects, a lot of which are historical information. So you may see projects from years ago when the field is turned off, but when we have it on, it should filter to everything that's in the 25 to 29 CIP. I'm just going to do a quick project test here. So if you click on the more info button within the project field, it'll kind of zoom into the location, you know, provide an example of, you know, project details, such as, for example, if the project's been advertised as this one has, there's information when construction work got started, you know, general information about project status. If you go over to the public comments field and click on it, it's not accurate. Okay. Well, that would bring up, you know, for the interface that I showed on the slide where there should be a field for you to enter your name and your specific comment about the CIP. So that's how this would function. And, you know, we can, hopefully we have that link in the chat already, but that's also something that's accessible through our mass.gov at CIP website, where you can identify specific projects that may be of interest.
Great. Thank you, Michelle. It's a very helpful demonstration. And that link is available in the chat, Steve. So if you navigate to the chat, you'll see that Stephanie has posted that link under the CIP comment tool text. Let me just bring the presentation up once more. We're back at the beginning. Sorry about that.
Just while we're waiting for any other comments folks may have, I will note that one thing, in addition to sharing these comments with our within MassDOT and with our board of directors, we do produce a comment and response summary that we post on our CIP webpage at the conclusion of the CIP development process. So that'll highlight major themes that came up during the public comment period and different types of feedback that folks submitted. we'll put comments and details about MassDOT's response. So that's another item you can look for later this summer, covering how we approached comments that were provided on the CIP. So if there aren't any other questions for tonight, I want to thank folks for attending and my MassDOT and MPO colleagues for participating tonight. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your evening.
Thank you, Michelle. Thanks, everyone.